Hi, all, and welcome to another episode of Sustaining Sustainability. I'm your host, Chris Gassman, the Senior Associate Director at the Center for Sustainable Business at the University of Pittsburgh. This week, I'm joined from Durham, North Carolina by Katie Kross, the Managing Director of the Center for Energy, Development, and Global Environment at Duke University, including the ClimateCAP Initiative, a partnership of 20 plus business schools advancing education about the business risks of climate change. Katie has spent more than 15 years in university and nonprofit administration and is the author of Profession and Purpose, a resource guide for MBA careers in sustainability. We've asked Katie here to reflect on the most recent ClimateCAP Summit, an annual event that brings MBA students and industry leaders together to learn about the business implications of climate change. Katie, welcome to the show.
Thanks. It's good to talk to you, Chris.
Yeah, I'm excited for our conversation today. So, what topics have you seen gain the greatest interest in the recent years of the summit?
Yeah, happy to talk about that. I think maybe it would be helpful if I just give a little bit of historical context and tell you a little bit more about the summit as a starting place, if that works for you, Chris.
Sure. That's perfect.
It has been such a roller coaster ride and really incredible to see the growth of interest in ClimateCAP since we started. You know, ClimateCAP started as just an idea back in 2016. At that time, my colleague, Dan Vermeer, who's our center's executive director, and I had just both returned from industry conferences where we had heard corporate sustainability executives talking about climate risks and their climate strategies. And we came back to Fuqua and just really had the stark realization that we were hearing industry talk about climate change as a business issue, but it wasn't making its way into the conversation at business school yet. So even among our students, you know, we had at the time students who were personally passionate about the climate crisis, but they weren't necessarily connecting the dots to the actual business risks and opportunities. And sometimes it's a little hard to remember what the world was like back then. I don't know if you remember, there was the snowball on the Senate floor moment in 2015. We were still in the midst of there were still conversations debating whether climate change was a real phenomenon or not. And we really wanted to sort of put that conversation aside and talk about the tangible business risks and opportunities and how, you know, every MBA, as in our perspective, is going to have to lead on issues that relate to climate change in the course of their business careers. So, you know, whether you're in marketing or finance or operations or strategy, you as an MBA, as an investor, as an entrepreneur, as a business leader in the future are going to have to understand the business implications of climate change. So that was our aha moment. And we really saw this sort of gap in business school education on the climate topic. So what we did was hold a convening where we invited MBAs from any school to attend a conference, a one-day summit called ClimateCAP, the Global MBA Summit on Climate, Capital, and Business. And the first summit was held at Fuqua. We started with business school partners. It's always been a partnership initiative. So in that first summit, we had 157 students there from 16 different business schools. And then most of the speakers we invited almost all of them were exclusively from the private sector. So JP Morgan Chase and Nike and Kellogg and the kinds of companies that MBAs want to work for, talking about how climate would have, you know, operational impacts on their supply chain, how climate risks would factor into their investment decisions, how climate would create new, interesting innovation and climate tech opportunities in the future. So, you know, fast forward to 2023, now the conversation, I think, in general has changed quite a lot. And it's really exciting to see how much momentum there is. I think there are very few businesses that aren't talking about climate risk today. And the summit this year was hosted by UT Austin's McCombs School of Business in Texas. For the first time ever, the conference sold out immediately. So it's only open to MBA students, and this year it sold out in 2 hours. So McCombs could accommodate about 300 attendees. Yeah, right. And there was a wait list of 250 MBA students on the wait list to get in. So that really is a signal about, student demand and how important it is to today's MBA students to be prepared, not just to understand climate risk, but actually to take action. So you asked a bit, originally your question was about topics. Each year the summit is hosted by a different business school, as I alluded to. So Duke has hosted, and UVA's Darden School of Business has hosted. Northwestern's Kellogg School of Management has hosted. McCombs hosted this year. And each year the host school really gets to set the agenda based on what their students and alumni are really excited to dig into deeper. But for sure, I would say that the momentum has been moving more away from just acknowledging the business implications of climate and moving into, okay, how are we actually going to take action? How are we going to become change makers? How are we going to go deep into the real work of measuring climate risks and capitalizing on opportunities in this space?
Very cool, and super exciting to see all of the recent interest and burgeoning interest in these myriad of topics and functions, or the applications of the various functions. What's thinking about that most recent one, Katie? This year there was a panel on hard to decarbonize industries. What opportunities do you see for higher education, research, and innovation to accelerate the decarbonization of these industries?
Sure, yeah. I think everyone is talking about how do we decarbonize the economy, whether that's in sort of any sector across the board. The McCombs team on the ClimateCAP Summit agenda this year did have a panel on hard to decarbonize industries. It was a terrific snapshot. As you know, we need to decarbonize across the entire economy. Some industries like concrete, cement production, steel, aviation, heavy industrial applications. Some are harder than others, I would say, to achieve net zero. And I think those industries are becoming really innovative and in looking at solutions. That panel was moderated by Becky Duff, who's at UVA's Darden School of Business, and she and her colleague Mike Lennox are co-authors of a really terrific book called The Decarbonization Imperative. So it was a really terrific discussion between Becky and I think there was a speaker from one of the airline companies, there was a speaker from one of the chemical companies, some of the energy investment firms, talking about how do we actually stimulate more investment in decarbonization solutions for those industries that are maybe harder to decarbonize than some others.
Gotcha. Yeah, and so thinking about that, the innovation side of it, right? There's a lot of opportunity, like you were talking about, for these industries. Before we were referring to decarbonize, there's still a lot that remains there about their various processes and the energies that they use. You've spoken about, you coached MBAs on careers and sustainability. How do you define your personal purpose, and how does that affect your approach to impact-related career coaching?
I think it's a great question. Obviously, my personal purpose as an educator is probably a little bit different than how maybe our students or alumni are thinking about their personal purpose in a sustainability-related career. As an educator, my purpose is to help inspire and enable and empower the next generation of business leaders to be savvy on sustainability and climate topics. So my personal hope is that by shining a light on the sustainability issues and how they affect business, that our MBAs, no matter what career they go into after graduation, whether they're working in sort of a traditional kind of investment banking or management consulting, CPG brand management role, or whether they intend to make climate tech the focus of their career or they intend to work in a mission-driven business, or whether they intend to work in a corporate sustainability role, that they have a really fundamental understanding of how social and environmental issues are going to affect business decision-making in the future. So that's my lens. Obviously, I take this sort of mission focus myself in my own career. And so I think that our students would probably frame it a little bit differently as they're thinking about their own personal purpose statements.
Naturally. Well, Katie, I would love to continue the conversation. So much more to go into. We are coming up close on time. So want to, as we wrap up here, we usually ask all of our guests what call to action they would make to our listeners. Here, though, I want to flip it a bit and ask you, what was your biggest takeaway from the summit?
So I alluded to this a little bit earlier, but it's very clear to me that sitting where we are right now in 2023, just how much momentum and enthusiasm there is for accelerating action on climate. And this is really a different feeling than I would say even a few years ago. I think it's fueled in part by the groundswell of interest from the investment community in reducing climate risk. I think it's also due in part to the momentum of the Inflation Reduction Act and the innovation and investment that's going to spur. But it's definitely noticeable to me that our students are, and the students from other schools as well, that they're engaged, excited, and increasingly feeling the urgency of incorporating an understanding of climate risk and opportunity into their own managerial decision-making and investment careers. So I was really inspired by the conversations, the questions the students were asking, the enthusiasm for them to work together, not just within their own schools, but collaborate with students from many different schools, and to keep the conversation going. So I think there's lots more work for all of us to do, lots more resources to bring to bear, but I was really inspired to see the level of energy and the momentum at this year's ClimateCAP Summit.
Brilliant. So that is a perfect note of positive forward momentum for us to wrap this one on. So Katie, thank you so much for joining us today. Much appreciated.
Really great to talk to you, Chris.
My pleasure.
And before we sign off, my name is Kristen P. Ahern, and I'm the producer and editor of Sustaining Sustainability. This podcast is made by the Center for Sustainable Business at the University of Pittsburgh, directed by C.B. Bhattacharya. It is made possible by all our member companies. To learn more about our upcoming programs or about becoming a member, please go to sustainablebusiness.pitt.edu or follow us at PittCSB on all social platforms. If you liked this episode, please share it with a friend or colleague, and we'll see you soon for another episode of Sustaining Sustainability.